Okay, very good. Get a red light on the consent.
Red light on.
All right. Joining me now on Illinois Lawmakers, Democratic House Speaker Michael Madigan of Chicago. Good to have you on the program, sir.
Nice to be with you.
We're talking on May 31st, the last scheduled day of the spring session of the Illinois General Assembly, but it looks like at this point things are going to go into overtime. The Democrats have come up with a budget outline that they think helps protect working class families, does a lot of things that the governor's budget, as originally introduced, would not do. The governor, though, says this thing's a phony budget. You're lacking $3 billion in revenues. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me begin by saying that in January, at the time of the legislative inauguration, I pledged to Governor Rauner that I would work with him cooperatively and professionally. And I've continued to do that throughout this session. I will continue to work with the governor cooperatively and professionally throughout the remainder of this calendar year and into the next term of the General Assembly. In my judgment, the number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. I'm focused on eliminating the budget deficit. I don't think you can cut your way out of the budget deficit. I think you have to do cuts. You also have to do new revenue. The legislature has already sent to the governor a bill that would save $400 million in the Medicaid program. And the spending plan that I support does numerous cuts in spending all through the budget. The spending plan that I support is one that protects and helps middle-class families by providing support for local police, local roads and bridges, local schools. To the extent that the state does not provide support for local school districts, local police, local roads and bridges, why the local governments are called upon to pick up that cost, which just puts more pressure on the property tax. The governor would say he has an alternative spending plan. What he doesn't tell you is that the spending plan that he filed anticipated spending over $2 billion of anticipated savings in a pension plan that was never filed before the legislature.
And that pension plan, never filed, as you indicated, would come up against the Supreme Court ruling on Senate Bill 1 and would seem to be, no lawyer, but it would seem to have problems with constitutionality, and that the court has ruled that you can't diminish those benefits.
Yeah. You're correct. The Supreme Court ruling on the pension bill that was sent to the Supreme Court is pretty clear that it's going to be close to impossible to reduce pension benefits in all of the Illinois pension systems.
There were also other reductions in that the budget that the governor put on file, that $1.5 billion in savings or cuts from Medicaid, other cuts to human services, programs that Democrats have traditionally supported.
In addition, he wanted to cut in half the amount of money that would be sent to local governments, which they would use to support their police departments. And he wanted to cut in half the amount of money that would be spent to the transit districts, which would put more pressure on fare increases.
The governor basically outlined a business-friendly agenda that he called the turnaround agenda that initially had in it things like right-to-work zones, changes in prevailing wage agreements that are done at the local level, a number of things that he wanted, property tax freezes, for example, workers' compensation reform, tort reform. Those bills never were filed until late in the session. You and in the Democratic House basically, but as best as I understand it, you put some of those proposals forward and they went nowhere.
The governor has advanced non-budget issues. Now, I have a spending plan that I support. It helps and protects middle-class families by providing support for local schools, local police, local roads and streets. And the governor has come along and said that in addition to working on the elimination of the budget deficit, he wants to bring non-budget issues before the General Assembly. My concern is that to the extent that he wants to bring certain non-budget issues before the General Assembly and leverage those against the spending plan that I'm talking about, that he's taking this project of eliminating the budget deficit to the extreme. And to the extent that he functions in the extreme, He's not helping for the elimination of the budget deficit. All of this has to happen in moderation. Everybody has to be reasonable. And as I said at the beginning, number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. We ought to get to work on eliminating that. I have a spending plan that helps and protects middle-class families. The governor wants to bring non-budget issues before the General Assembly, leverage them against our efforts to eliminate the budget deficit. And to me, that's functioning in the extreme.
He says that he's taken a lot of those items off the table in recent weeks and days, and that it appears to folks who are watching this process unfold that what he's really getting at this point is he wants to see some sort of workers' compensation reform passed that would move Illinois off of the list of amongst the highest in the country in terms of workers' compensation rates, and he wants to do something about property taxes.
Sure.
Are those unachievable in view of the situation?
Number one, whenever you reduce the benefit level in workers' compensation, you're reducing the standard of living for middle-class families. You're forcing injured workers to go to the welfare programs or to the emergency room. And so I've explained to the governor that when he talks in terms of reducing the benefit level in workers' compensation, reducing the standard of living for middle-class families, he's running up against core beliefs by both Democrats and Republicans in the General Assembly. People are elected to come here not to hurt middle-class families. They're sent here to help middle-class families. On the property tax freeze, a bill was called in the House to freeze property taxes. 37 people voted for the bill, all Democrats, no Republicans. Had every Republican voted for the bill would be over in the Senate, under consideration in the Senate.
The governor seems to be dug in pretty deeply, though. He says that if he doesn't see something in the way of, be it property tax relief, be it workers' compensation reform, that he's not going to budge on the question of new revenues, which you insist upon must be part of this whole thing.
Well, my concern, and this is some evidence to support this, is that he's functioning in the extreme. He's not acting in moderation. He's functioning in the extreme. And let me repeat, both Democrats and Republicans have core beliefs that we shouldn't reduce the standard of living for middle-class families in Illinois.
You've said many occasions here lately that you don't want to engage in name calling. You don't see the profit in that. But the Democratic Party's mailed out mailers against some of the House Republicans. The governor, on his side, seems to be ready to mount a huge air war and mailing campaign against Democrats such as yourself if he doesn't get what he wants in the next few days.
That's functioning in the extreme, not in moderation. Again, number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit.
Are you ready, though, as the state chairman also of the Democratic Party, to put your members at the risk of a $34 million campaign aimed targeted against them?
That wouldn't be my decision. That would be the decision of somebody else. Again, to me, that appears to be functioning in the extreme.
A reporter friend of mine says that Michael Madigan is known for his flair for the dramatic from time to time. That, at the end of a session, some rabbit may be pulled out of the hat that shocks all of us by surprise. I don't see any hats sitting around the office this morning as we talk. Is there any last-minute thing that could break this logjam, Mr. Speaker?
If everybody's reasonable, if everybody functions in moderation. Moderation is the key element that we need in terms of eliminating the budget deficit, having a state spending plan that helps and protects middle-class families.
You've passed the budget in the House, and the Senate has come together on its own version of the same thing. Will the governor actually get the budget implementation language or bill to actually put this thing into being?
We will send the bills to the governor. We may not send them today, but we'll be prepared to send the bills to the governor.
What's the strategy of waiting later on that?
It's just an opportunity for everyone to step back, think about this key word, moderation, not function and talk in the extreme, because talking and functioning in the extreme when you're trying to eliminate the budget deficit does not help. It hurts.
Mr. Speaker, thanks very much for the time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got two shot here, Jak.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
You going to do this somewhere else?
Huh?
Are you going to do this somewhere else? You have somebody else lined up?
I'm going to talk to Redonio and Durkin.
Yeah.
I just talked to Cullerton on Thursday. I think we're
Okay,
pretty
good.
much in good shape with him.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
You're
it,
welcome.
sir.
Yeah.
Steve, what do you think? What do you think about